Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Greater Houston Partnership's 2020 Rise to the Top Luncheon. Please welcome the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Harvey.
All right, while you take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone. As was just said, my name is Bob Harvey. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership. And that almost explains why I'm here, because as President, this is one of my favorite events of the year. So for all the women on my staff, thank you for inviting me again this year to this event. I know every year you debate whether I should come, but it's great to be here. You know, this is our 9th annual Rise to the Top Luncheon. And of course, we just have exceptional female leaders that are going to be up here on the stage today. They lead the way in energy, technology, engineering, and innovation, and really countless other fields. And we're celebrating these remarkable women at a very special time. And as you must know, International Women's Day is Sunday, March 8th. And it's great. You know, last year we moved this event to coincide with International Women's Day, which has just added, I think, to the whole atmosphere at the event. And it's been great to see everyone come out for that. But this year marks something particularly special. You probably have thought about this, but perhaps you haven't. This year is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which of course guaranteed and protects women's right to vote. So 100 years ago, yes. You know, I dare say no one was here 100 years ago. I'm looking around the room, but I'm pretty confident to say that. Such that, you know, frankly, it's hard to imagine an America where women didn't have the right to vote. But think about those women 100 years ago who said how wrong it was that wasn't the case and who made it happen. As you all know the story, it wasn't an easy journey, but quite remarkable. So let's think about today. Today, the Partnership's Women's Business Alliance and our Executive Women's Partnership will be hosting a special celebration, not today, but this summer, commemorating the 19th Amendment. So watch for details on that event. We'll come back to that topic later in a few months. I mentioned that we have an impressive group of women who will be on the stage today. We have a panel, but in addition to our panel, we'll be welcoming Gretchen Watkins. As you all know, Gretchen is president of Shell Oil Company and executive vice president of Shell's upstream unconventional business. So I must say, when we look at where things stand in Houston today, I believe I can say, and I believe you'll agree, that we've come a long way in terms of women's leadership in Houston over these last years and decades. I'm going to reference Spencer Stewart's 2019 Board Index. Perhaps you've seen it. I saw it just a couple of weeks ago. It's a compilation of data about Houston's public companies, New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ-traded public companies. They reported this year that nearly a quarter, 23%, of the board seats on Houston-headquartered public companies are now held by women. And we added 24 new women this year to that group. In 2011, only 8% of the board seats on Houston public boards were held by women. So we've gone from 8% to 23% since 2011. 93% of Houston public companies now have at least one female director, and that's twice as many companies having female directors as a decade ago. So I'll tell you, that other 7%, better watch out. We know who you are, so you've got a year to fix that. With respect to the partnership, I'm very pleased to share that the partnership's board now features 29 female directors, 29. Just, again, over 20% of our board, 23%. And I would say this about the board of the partnership: it's more of a reflection of Houston than anything else, because you must be the senior executive of your company or firm or institution to serve on our board. So the fact that we have roughly 23% of our board female now, again, is a reflection of the fact that the women are serving in these executive leadership positions across the city. I'll also report that we had our first female chair of our board back in 2003. Deborah Cannon, many of you must know Deborah. Deborah was our first board chair, female board chair. In 2015, Gina Luna, at the time with J.P. Morgan Chase, was our second female chair. And next year, I'm very excited to say, as most of you already know, Amy Cronus with Deloitte will be our third female chair of the board next year for the partnership. So anyway, we're making progress. Now, you're going to hear from a few of the exceptional women in this program just here in a few minutes. But we still have a ways to go. I mentioned that 93% of Houston companies have a female board director, so that suggests we still have a ways to go to get to 100%. In aggregate, the fact that we have 23% of our public company board seats female is still a little bit behind the national average, not a much. The national S&P average is 26%. So while that 26% will be going up, we need to catch and exceed the national average. So we're making progress, but I don't want to suggest that there isn't a ways to go. Now, our so-called business resource groups, like the Partnership's Women's Business Alliance, are essential to ensuring that our high-performing women in Houston have a wide range of professional development opportunities, that they're able to leverage career advancement opportunities, form strategic partnerships, build a network of advocates, all those things that we know are critical to advancing one's career in Houston. So the Women's Business Alliance, which I tend to say is more about mid-career women and helping them advance in their careers, is focused on making that happen. Now, we need all of Houston's business community to engage with and support these efforts so that our women can continue to progress in these leadership roles. So here we go. Now, before we jump into today's program, let me take a moment and acknowledge our generous sponsors of today's event.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Your generous support is essential to the success of the Greater Houston Partnership and our mission of making Houston greater. Please join us in thanking our 2020 Rise to the Top sponsors. Today's Emerald sponsors: AIG, the Audi International School, BP America, Comcast, Deloitte, Shell Oil Company. Our Ruby sponsors: AT&T, BB&T Now Truist, ExxonMobil Corporation, Fifth Third Bank, HCA Houston Healthcare, HP Incorporated, Ignite Healthcare, New Quest Properties, Prairie View A&M University, Sempra Energy, Social Media Underwriter BBVA, Program Underwriter Texas A&M University Mays Business School, Supporting Partners DNA Studios, Girl Scouts of San Jacinto Council. Also, thanks to our staging partner, JSAV, and our production partner, Vision. Please join the Greater Houston Partnership in a round of applause for all of the people and companies who make our work possible. Together, we truly are making Houston greater.
Thank you again to our sponsors. I'd now like to recognize the elected officials who are present, and I'll ask you to stand and remain standing. It's a short list, but I want to recognize you both. Harris County District Clerk Marilyn Burgess. Marilyn, where are you? There you are. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll have to say, a new city council member, Tiffany Thomas. Tiffany, where are you? Where is Tiffany? There's Tiffany. Thank you. Thank you. You talk about women taking over. Look at Houston City Council, right? That's right. That's great. I would like to recognize the members of the Consular Corps who are here. Can the members of the Consular Corps who are present today stand? I know there are some of you over here. Over one, thank you. I'd like to take a moment and recognize a member of the staff of the partnership. She's led our membership team for more than 20 years. She was responsible for the creation of the Executive Women's Partnership. We announced right before the holidays that she would be leaving the partnership in June, or she said transitioning. We're still trying to figure out what that means. I want to recognize Susan Asamikis for the impact she's had on our work. Susan, would you stand? You know, there are times as a leader where someone says they're planning to transition, and you really have no idea how the organization is going to function without that person, and that's one of those situations here. So Susan, we're happy for you, we're mad at you, but we wish you the best. You know, last year we had nearly 700 attendees at this event, and we did a global pose for International Women's Day, and this year we're going to show the world that we have close to 900 attendees at this event celebrating the achievement of women. Because after all, as we say, equality is not just a woman's issue, it's a business issue. So when I call your group out, I'm going to ask you to stand and remain standing until the very end of, I'll ask several groups to stand. So each group, just stand and remain standing as other groups join you. And we'll have this great photo opportunity. If you've noticed, the lights have picked up a bit. And ultimately, the photographer will be back there, but you have a minute. So let's start. Let's acknowledge the partnerships, the Greater Houston Partnerships, female board members who are here. But I'm going to say all partnership board members, so I can remain standing. Can all the partnership board members stand and be recognized? Greater Houston Partnership. Hey, Cindy. So remain standing. Now, members of our Executive Women's Partnership, of the Greater Houston Partnership, but the members of EW, please stand and join this group. Okay. Now again, EWP is an organization for top-ranking females of companies with over 100 million of revenue. It's by application, so again, if you're interested in EWP and if you qualify, see the staff afterwards. Now, Women's Business Alliance, I referred to earlier. With all the members of WBA, please stand and join this group. And I know there's a lot of WBA members here. Now, I'm going to call out one company. You probably could tell a minute ago there are a lot of people here from HP. So I think we have over 50 people here from HP Inc. So, Carol, can all of the HP Inc. folks join this group standing? I suspect many of you are part of an employee resource group focused on women, kind of as an affinity group. You may not call it an ERG, but you know what I mean. If you're part of an ERG focused on women's opportunities, would you stand and join the group? Great. Great. Now listen carefully, particularly if you're one of the guys in the room. If you are, well, let me find out the exact language here. If you support women's inclusion in the workplace, now can you please stand? Now, I think this is meant to be everyone else, not just the men in the room. So can everyone please stand? So now everyone stand, everyone in the group, everyone stand. And if you would now face the back of the room where you see the lighting, you see the ladder, you may not be able to see any better than I can, that there's actually a photographer back there. Now, our staff at the back is going to show you the pose for the 2020 International Women's Day pose, each for equal. So can you see that? It kind of looks like an equal sign. That's clever. All right, everyone is waving. But I have to tell you, the wave was to tell me that all the photographs had been taken, so. All right. We intend to post that picture, perhaps by this afternoon, we're going to try to. Certainly by Monday, we'll have posted that picture on your website. Now, if you told your supervisor that you are going somewhere else today for lunch, you'll have to handle that issue yourself. So let's enjoy lunch. The program will begin again in a few minutes. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. See you in a little bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Harvey. So
it's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Gretchen Watkins. As president of Shell Oil Company, Gretchen oversees Shell's businesses in the United States. And of the 70-plus countries where Shell does business around the world, the U.S. is the only country where Shell has a presence literally in every dimension of the business, upstream, midstream, downstream, you name it, Shell is in it in the U.S. The country plays a central role in Shell's global aspiration to thrive through the transition to a lower carbon energy system. Gretchen also serves as EVP for Shell's upstream unconventional business, and in that capacity, she oversees the exploration, development, and production of onshore shale resources. Prior to joining Shell in May of 2018, Gretchen was Chief Executive Officer of Maersk Oil, and before that, she held senior executive roles at BP and Marathon Oil. She's a member of the partnership's board of directors. She began her career in Houston and has lived abroad in Europe, Asia, and of course back here again. She's truly an international woman. So please join me in welcoming Gretchen Watkins to the stage.
Thanks so much, Bob. We're doing the elbow bumps now, I guess, although I'm still giving some people hugs here. It is really an honor and a privilege to be here to support the mission of the Greater Houston Partnership and to be invited to speak at this luncheon with so many distinguished guests. The partnership is absolutely essential for fueling innovation here in Houston. For example, it was the Greater Houston Partnership that commissioned the study in 2017 that started the momentum for the ION, which will soon begin construction in Midtown. This is going to be a space where entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, people with big ideas, companies small and large can gather together to look at a whole range of interactions and take advantage of the synergies that they need to flourish. So as I look around here, I see a group of people that also have a lot of synergies together here in this room, and I'm very, very grateful for the GHP for bringing us all together so that we can collaborate and support one another today. You know, I work in a field that has historically been underrepresented by women, and that's putting it mildly. When I studied engineering at Penn State and I graduated, my graduating class was 86% men. I remember actually one of the first things I did in my new job. So I graduated from Penn State and I went to work for Amoco as a facilities engineer, and I was responsible for the offshore oil and gas platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. And so one of the first things I got to do was to size a pump that was going to be installed in one of these platforms offshore. And this is exactly what I had trained for in school, right? I knew I had to look up, I had to understand temperatures and pressures and volumes, and I sized my pump, I called up and I ordered my pump, I had a budget to spend. And so the first thing that I got to do after doing all that was I actually got to go offshore and be there while the pump was being installed and commissioned, and I was really excited. So I had been offshore several times before, and I was in the helicopter being flown out to this platform. And we are approaching the platform to land, and I see the workboat there, and there's this crane and this big box hanging off the end of the crane, and I thought, well, that does not look like my pump. I was looking for a smaller box, and what is this big thing? So I got off the helicopter, and I went down, and I met with the two guys that were manning this platform, and I said, what's that big box? And they're like, that's your big box. I'm like, that is not my pump. My pump is smaller. And they're like, oh no, your pump's here. It's on the deck below, but that's your box. I'm like, I don't get it. What do you mean? They're like, well, that's where you're going to be sleeping for the next week while you're out here. You know, as long as that platform had been in existence, the two guys that manned that were guys. There had never been a need for women's sleeping quarters on this particular platform. They had never planned for a woman to need her own space until I arrived. So I didn't fully realize it then, but this was a glimpse of things to come in my life, my new normal. To achieve success in the field that I had chosen, I would have to be comfortable with being the first woman to work in certain locations, in certain conditions, and frankly, to hold certain titles. So I'm sure many of you can relate to this burden of firsts. When we grow up hearing how we need to break through the glass ceiling, we think, yeah, I get that. But then it's like, well, what do we do when we've broken through? So let's talk about that today. The way I see it, once we've had individual success in our career, it's then our next step to really broaden our ambitions, to do our part, to ensure that women who come next don't have to break through that ceiling. Today, in my field of engineering, women get only 21% of the bachelor's degrees, according to the National Science Foundation. That's better than the 14% when I graduated, but it's still a pretty small minority. And of those who get postgraduate degrees in engineering, only 1 in 4 are women. The numbers are similar when you look at math, computer science, physics, chemistry. So why is this? Well, in the past, conventional prejudice, which may have been called wisdom, would say that girls and women just aren't as good at STEM subjects as boys and men. But it turns out that that's false. There's actually research showing that girls actually do better than boys in STEM exams. It also shows, yeah, you want to clap for that? It also shows, however, that boys have a much higher confidence level when it comes to STEM performance, which can lead them to select that career more often. And girls' relative lack of self-confidence in that area may be what leads them away from careers in the STEM fields. This suggests to me that social forces are pushing our young people in different directions. The result is that engineering and other professional fields are losing talented women to other careers. The good news, though, is that I see a younger generation of girls and women increasingly willing to challenge stereotypes about the careers that they should choose. 3 of my 4 family members are here today. My 2 teenage daughters and my husband is here. The only one missing is my teenage son, who's back at school taking a test. But my oldest daughter, Josephine, is 17, and she's starting to look at colleges. And she's seriously considering a major in engineering, of course, because she's got 2 parents for engineers. But I was actually really astonished and quite impressed to find out that all on her own, she's been researching prospective colleges based on the gender makeup of their engineering schools. I never did this, in part because, frankly, I never thought there was an engineering school where there would be 50-50 male-female ratios in their engineering programs. And this brings me to maybe a bit of a controversial topic, the idea of setting targets for parity in education and in hiring. A few years ago, I was speaking on a panel, and this was when I still lived in Scandinavia, and a question was raised about a Norwegian law that had been passed that required 30% of all board of directors to be women. And so the question was, what do you think of that law? And so one of the men on the panel with me said, well, the Norwegians really don't look very smart about this because there's not enough women to fill those 30%. And I've even heard some stories about waitresses being put on boards of directors because they just can't find these women. So fortunately, I was there to take a deep breath and say, however, there's another way to look at this. We're solving one problem by putting 30% of the board of directors as women, and we're uncovering another problem, and then let's go solve that one. So if there aren't enough women in the C-suites to put on these boards, then let's go pull through the talent that's sitting there waiting to move into these C-suite jobs. I'm a firm believer in that. So our global economy is ruled by forces of supply and demand. Pretty simple. If we don't set targets for achieving gender parity, then we are not strengthening the demand for women in leadership. We're not incentivizing recruitment, and we're not encouraging the active development of promising young women. Rather, I think we're allowing the same old social forces we were just talking about to hold women back. And those old glass ceilings are going to snap right back into place. It's bad for women, it's bad for the companies, and it's that want to hire the best and the brightest. So if my daughter, Josephine, is studying the gender parity of schools, then so are other talented young women, and they are going to gravitate to schools and companies that have achieved gender parity. So if your company is not setting targets to increase the number of women hires, then your talent pool is shallower than it should be. Some may ask, well, does this put a target on my back? I mean, if I get a promotion, are people going to assume I only got a promotion because I'm a woman? Well, I guess that depends. I mean, do you think that the guy that plays golf with his boss on the weekends worries about whether people think he got a promotion because he plays golf on the weekends? I don't think he's worried about that. So if you get a job, go perform the heck out of it and then move on to the next big challenge. So how does my own employer, Shell, stack up on gender diversity? Well, of the 11 seats on our board, actually 5 of them are held by women, so we do pretty good there. At the senior leadership level, though, it has been more challenging, and it links back to the question that was asked when I was in Scandinavia. So just to give you an idea of that, in 2006, women were only 4% of our senior executive leadership in the company. But today, actually, women are over 26% of the senior executives, and I believe 30% is very shortly on the horizon. But I'm also really pleased to say that here in the United States, 40% of our executive leadership is women. And I also know that we're taking a lot of proactive efforts to attract female students to STEM careers, even as far back as middle school and high school, so that in time there's more women to pull from in these talent pools for promotions. So in addition to fighting for gender equity, the second action that women can take after you break through that glass ceiling is to show some long-term vision. Show people you're there to stay for a while. In my example, in my industry, this means acknowledging that society must have a path to a lower carbon energy future. You know, studies show that women are more likely to be concerned about climate change and to favor actions that prevent it. And this was actually part of what attracted me to Shell when I came here in 2018. I saw an international energy company approaching the global energy transition not as a threat, but actually as a real opportunity, and as a chance to offer more and cleaner energy solutions that will shape the energy sustainability for our future. My job is to position Shell for that future here in this country. So I would imagine that many of you also were hired in the hopes that you would act as custodians of your company's future. If not in your current role, then maybe in your next more senior role or sometime in your years ahead. And that brings me to my final point. The third task for those of us who have battered through that glass ceiling. And this is especially important for those of you who are the first woman to hold your job or one of the very, very few women in that position. You are allowed to make mistakes. You may want to be perfect because you want to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that you should be there, that you belong, and that other women that are there with you, they belong too. But none of us carry the entire burden of womankind. None of us should feel the pressure to have it all the time, especially if our careers must be balanced with things like children, caring for aging parents. Sometimes achieving a work-life balance actually means putting life first, and we shouldn't feel guilty about that. One of the companies that I've worked for before Shell hired a woman into a job, and this was actually kind of a big deal because, and this was years ago, before there were, now there's a number of women in P&L roles, you know, we're running big operating units. I really, really wanted to run a big operating unit, but there was just one job in this particular company where they put a woman in it, and she did great. And then she moved on to another big job, and then they put another woman in it. And you could just kind of see like, okay, we've found one operating unit job where the women can get it. So the second woman comes in and she does great. So she goes on and does something great somewhere else in that company. And so I was like, I want that job because they think a woman can do it, and so I want that job. So I got that job. I got my first big executive leadership role, and I felt like, wow, this is like a great break for me. And then when I actually landed there, I looked around and I thought, holy mackerel, what if I screw this up? Like, am I gonna screw this up for all the women behind me that are like, I want that job, you know, the one job that the women can have? Whew. I have to say, I felt a lot of pressure, but I finally just said, all right, I'm gonna do my best. And you know what? It actually turned out pretty well for me. So perfection is not the standard by which you or anyone should be judged. Instead, let's examine our impact. Are the decisions that you make and the actions that you take of net benefit to the company that you work for? Are you helping society? Are you helping other women? Are you ensuring that you're not holding other women to a higher standard than you do men? Are you helping all women? If so, then any failure that occurs along the way can really be a useful learning lesson that you can apply forward to things that you do in the future. You know, someone once said, success is moving from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. And I think there is great truth in that. So if you are relentlessly self-critical, and I know you're out there, I'd like to suggest a slightly new approach. 2 days from now is International Women's Day, and I think what a better time to start that. Take a moment over these next few days and really remember the reasons that you have to be proud of you. Remember the risks that you took. Remember the fears you faced, the barriers that you've climbed over, the times you were discouraged and despairing. And then the grit and determination that you summoned to continue on all the same. Those are the experiences that have helped shape you into the person that you are today. So be proud, take a moment to be proud of how far you have come. Have faith that you are building a better future for yourself. And keep going, mindful that you're forging a path for the next generation of women. Thank you so much, Bob. Thanks to the Greater Houston Partnership, and thanks to all of you for being here today and supporting each other. Thank you.
Dear Madam.
Dear Madam.
Dear Madam,
In reply to your recent communication,
I would state that we have not now, have never had,
and do not expect to have in the near future
any women students registered in our engineering department.
Yours very truly.
We do not permit women to register in the engineering school under our present regulations. Are you serious?
I suspect the number of women who have undertaken general engineering courses
is so few that you will hardly be able to form an organization. However, I may be mistaken.
While we cannot legally register women in the college,
there is nothing to prevent our admitting them as visitors,
which permits them the benefit of instruction,
although without status as students.
Dear lady.
Dear lady?
For Pete's sake.
Dear lady, up to the present, women students have not been admitted.
Period.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 2020 Chair of the Greater Houston Partnership's Executive Women's Partnership and Senior Director, Government Relations, The Boeing Company, Darcy Durham.
To quote Gretchen Watkins, whew. I have seen that video many times, and it's still powerful and a little bit infuriating. As the video stated, only 13% of engineers in the workforce are women. Thankfully, at Boeing, we are changing that. And in Houston, we are changing that. And at Shell, we are changing that. And at HP, we are changing that. And today, on this glorious, almost International Women's Day, we are changing that. So, I want to thank you, Gretchen, for your powerful insights. As stated, my name is Darcy Durham, and I'm the Senior Regional Director of Government Relations at the Boeing Company. I also have the pleasure of serving as the chair this year for the Executive Women's Partnership with the Greater Houston Partnership. Now, as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment this year, we need to pause to reflect on how far we've come in those 100 years. As that video clearly shows, the world has changed. In the world that we live in today, women can attend universities and study engineering. We can hold corporate leadership positions or serve as a board chair. Through the Executive Women's Partnership, I've been able to connect with many of Houston's top business leaders because EWP is truly Houston's premier networking group for female executives. Open to member companies generating $100 million plus in revenue, EWP offers executive women the opportunity to address business issues and interests, learn from each other, exchange ideas and information, and form some amazing friendships. I encourage the female executives in the room today to learn more about EWP by visiting with partner staff. There will be some in the foyer at the conclusion of today's program. Now, I'll be moderating today's panel discussion, and it is my privilege to be here with each of you today to hear what these remarkable women have to say. Before we begin, I'd like to give you some background on our esteemed panelists. Our first panelist is Leslie Duke, president of Burns & McDonnell, Inc. As leader of Burns McDonnell's Houston, Austin, and Oklahoma City offices, Leslie Duke plays an integral role in leading the firm's engineering, procurement, and construction business in the Gulf Coast and Southwest region. In 2016, Leslie was named the first female president in the company's 120-year-plus history. With over 700 employee owners in the offices under her purview, Leslie's operations focus primarily on the permitting, design, and construction of high-voltage power, refining, chemical, terminal, and pipeline facilities. Please join me in welcoming Leslie Duke. Next is Carol Hess. She is the Vice President of Workstation Z Products at HP Inc. Carol is responsible for HP's desktop and mobile workstation business. She has been with HP for 30+ years in a variety of roles such as strategy, planning, business development, product management, and marketing. She is an executive sponsor of the Houston chapter of the Women's ERG Group and co-founder of the same group in Europe. Carol serves on the board of directors for 3 organizations: Y2Y Corporation, a publicly held Canadian company, the Greater Houston Partnership, and the Texas Diversity Council. Carol is a sought-after public speaker and an executive coach and mentor. Please welcome Carol Hess. Finally, please welcome Gabby Rowe, Executive Director of the ION, Rice's 300,000 square foot structure designed to bring the area's entrepreneurial, corporate, and academic communities together into collaborative spaces and programs. Prior to becoming the executive director of the ION, Gabby was CEO of Station Houston, the city's largest hub for startup technology acceleration, corporate innovation, and entrepreneurship. Gabby took Station Houston to the next level as a dominant global innovation hub, and as Rice University's partner for content and programming in the development of Houston's much anticipated innovation district. Please join me in welcoming Gabby Rowe. Right, well, thank you, ladies. So we'll get started. We've got some get to know you questions. So first we're gonna start off with a round of, what was your first job? We'll start with you, Leslie.
Thank you very much. So my first job was shooting things out of a cannon. So I was working in the research lab at Texas Tech, and we were studying hurricanes and tornadoes, and we shoved a bunch of stuff like 2x4s into cannons and shot it at things like glass to try to figure out, how it would perform. And so I had a pretty fun job.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's great. All right, Kara, how about you? What was your first job?
I actually had a paper route for my first job. My brother was a newspaper boy, and I was like, even back then, why can't I be a newspaper girl? And so this was in the early 70s, and I was one of the first newspaper girls, but I figured I could do it.
That's right. That's good. All right, and Gabby, how about you?
Well, I should have known this was a portent, in years back, but my first job was when I was about 9. And I decided that there was a business in laundry bags. So I told my mom I wanted to sell them in the neighborhood, and being a family of entrepreneurs, she said, of course. And so I hand-painted laundry bags and took orders outside the local liquor store on the corner. I don't know if there was a connection there, but I got that bug very early of as a girl, you can do anything, and you can build a business if you want to.
So no child labor laws back then that we had to worry about. That's good.
I clearly evaded them.
With your parents too. So let's see. Leslie, how did your first job get you to where you are?
Well, obviously engineering was my start, and so I started my career in construction when I graduated in the mid-90s. There were not a lot of engineering jobs back in our hometown, and so I went back to El Paso and I took a construction job. Then my husband's career brought us to Houston, and I knew I was going to get to be an engineer finally, because you get to be an engineer in Houston. And so I got a job with Burns & Mac a little over 20 years ago as a structural engineer, and then structural engineer to project manager to department manager to division manager. While division manager, became an executive at 37, so I was a very young new executive. And then eventually general manager and president, one of those firsts that you love but hate at the same time. So
very cool.
It's been a wonderful career.
Good. All right, and Carol, how about you? Paper girl?
So yeah, after paper girl, I went to school a little bit. After I got my MBA from Vanderbilt, I got it in marketing and management information systems, or computers. So I was able to get a job at Compaq, if you guys remember Compaq here in Houston. And what a great job, because I could take all that high-tech stuff that I learned, but I wasn't an engineer. I was a marketing person, so I could do marketing in a high-tech company. So it was a great combination together. And then, of course, being the hotshot MBA I thought I was at the time, I was like, I'll go there for a few years, I'll help them fix their company up, and I'll move on to something else, right? And 30 years later, I've stayed there because we've grown as a company. There were so many opportunities. I started in a worldwide group. I was really fortunate to get asked to do an assignment in Europe. So I was based in Munich, Germany for 4 years, and my husband and children went with me at the time and followed my career, so very supportive to do that. And then coming back to the US, there are so many jobs at a big company like HP. So from strategy to business planning to working in a region, lots of opportunities. So I was just able to continue to grow my career to where it is today.
Great, that's great. And now, Gabby, you have a very different background. Love to hear about this.
I do, and I think I could say I've come full circle from the laundry bags, but I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and educators. I'm a third-generation educator, and the one thing I knew growing up was I was definitely not going to be either an educator or an entrepreneur. I think it was the sort of being poor as a church mouse thing that got to me. But I called it my rebellion years, but I did about 15 years as an oil and gas M&A investment banker, and as a management consultant restructuring companies. And every team that I worked in those 14 years were exclusively men. It was the late 80s on Wall Street. I'm a born and bred New Yorker, although I claim Houstonian now. And it was very strange for me because I'd grown up with a family where it was all gender neutral. And as educators, we were constantly in these mixed groups of people trying to solve problems as opposed to thinking of where you came from or what your education was. And then I showed up on Wall Street in the 80s, And I had to think about things like wearing the right clothes so people couldn't put their hands up my skirt. And it was such a foreign concept, but it really formed so much of what I wanted to do to change the world going forward, and ultimately became a serial entrepreneur myself in New York, and now spend my life driving entrepreneurship from birth to exit.
That's great. That's great. So in a recent study by Smart Asset, Houston is at number 6 among the top cities for women in tech. That's down from the number 4 spot in 2019. However, Houston still holds the number 1 ranking among Texas cities. So what can we do as a region to recruit more female talent into tech jobs? And what can we do as a society to better these statistics and help our young women pursue careers in STEM? Carol, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. As you can imagine, being at HP, STEM is really important to us. So there's a couple of things that we do that I think we could expand on through different companies in Houston. So the first one is around recruiting. So we are very deliberate in our recruiting. And locally, not only do we go to maybe U of H or Rice, but we also go to Prairie View A&M. We also go to TSU. So we make sure we're going to the right types of universities and colleges to recruit the right types of people and bring them in. I'm really happy to say in 2019, just last year, over 60% of our new hires were minorities of some type, be it a woman or an underrepresented minority.
That's great.
So we've really come a long way there. So recruiting is part of it, but the other thing is, what can you do in the community, right? So we get very involved in, there's an organization called Black Women Code, if you guys are familiar with that one. There's the Society of Women Engineers. There's the Anita Borg organization that puts on the Grace Hopper conference that we attend every year and sponsor pretty much like we do here. So we get involved in those types of organizations. Locally, one that we've done very recently is we went out to some of the underrepresented communities here in Houston. We partnered with some of the local agencies. We gathered up about 50 women from these underrepresented communities, brought them into HP and said, look what it's like to, one, work at a high-tech company, but then also, what do engineering jobs look like? Like, what does it look like to be an industrial designer or a software developer or a coder? And so maybe you're interested in engineering, and even if you're not, there's still lots of other high-tech jobs or other jobs in high-tech that you'd be great at, like marketing or supply chain or finance. So going into the community and showing these women what is available and how they could even think about a company like HP has really gone a long way. So those are some of the things we try to do. And of course, once we do all that, we have to retain people, right? So we have to make sure people think HP is the best place to work, or whatever company you're at is the best place to work. You support people bringing them whole selves to work so that they can make sure they feel comfortable. So
that's great. That's good.
You know, I'd add, so, you know, if we think about how long we've been focusing on STEM in our schools, you know, we're many, many years into it, but if you think about a 12-year-old girl 10 years ago, which is probably when we really started getting serious about STEM, she's now graduating from college, right? So we see this now coming into our workforce, and the results are pretty powerful. And so, you know, Burns & Mac, we have a very robust intern program. This year we had 50% female, over 50%, more women than men in our intern program with no quota requirement, simply best athletes selected through a rigorous interview process, and we had over 50% interns female. That's huge. That's huge. So it's happening. We're getting there. You know, it's glacial pace, but it's happening for sure.
Well, and Gabby, I know with your background in education, you have a great perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was a principal of a K-12 for several K-12s for 18 years, and there are filter points that happen along the way, and I think we've talked about a couple of these in the workforce, but they start really young, and we are actually doing so much better in elementary and early middle school in STEM for girls than we did before. But 7th grade is a really big drop-off point. And it's the place in our educational system where all of our students are forced to make choices and prioritize interests. And Gretchen said this a little bit in her speech, but we lose significant STEM talent, girl STEM talent, permanently in 7th grade. And there are great college programs out there. There are starting to be some great high school programs, but we've got to start at the filter points. And we need to start at the filter points with the same job conversations that you talked about at HP, because that's what's filtering the girls out. It's whether it's families or peer pressure or some other form of societal influence, girls are being convinced that these are not the jobs for them, and we need to give them the concrete examples. I think we're doing more and more of that. I would just say we need to get younger and younger.
Okay, great. All right, now we'll do another sort of rapid fire round. So what strides have you seen women in your industry achieve in your lifetime that you celebrate? Start with you, Gabby.
Well, and this is a conversation I often have with young women who are passionately arguing pay parity and seats on the board, and I could not agree more wholeheartedly, but I sometimes feel I need to give the woman in the 80s perspective and remind people, particularly young women, how far we've come. I think it's also a time for us to give a huge shout out to many of the women, if not all the women in this room, for making that transition possible. We are so far along versus where we were in those days. That means we have what it takes. Doesn't mean we're done, but it means that we have what it takes. It means we have to continue to do the work, though.
All right, Carol?
The only thing I would add on top of that, because that would almost be my exact answer, is the other piece to put the icing on the cake is what I see now are all the men in the room today and the men in our careers that help support women through this whole effort. And so along with all the board work, it's all the guys.
I think they said it best.
Well, then this one to you. Since Rise to the Top falls near International Women's Day, let's talk about issues impacting women around the world for the next set of questions. So in a recent study by the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, in 2020 it was referenced that none of us will see gender parity in our lifetimes, and nor likely will many of our children. Gender parity being defined as economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. So knowing that this is a global statistic and not necessarily tied to the United States or developed countries, what are your companies doing to support closing one of these gaps?
Sure. So, we have, I think most companies today have organizations. We have a professional women's exchange. We have areas where we're trying to encourage women to get together, collaborate, and figure out, what the right course for them is and how to help each other. But we're now really, I think, peeling back the onion and trying to do a lot of surveying and why are our women, even those that we do have, not aspiring to loftier positions? Why are we not filling our pipelines full of female options and who we're picking for management? And we're seeing some things that I think once you start to peel it back, you can start to tackle it. But we are seeing some real tangible results in those looks. And one of those things is that we've really recognized that the process of giving people their reviews, their career reviews, women tend to get softer reviews than their male counterparts. And so what that means is the bosses of those young ladies or women are less willing to give that true hardcore coaching of how to advance your career to their female employees that they give to their male employees. So now we can talk to them about that. None of them want to be that person. It's a little bit more of a social issue. So we're working through some of these issues because we need everybody to get that kind of same playing field and coaching. But I would say to all the ladies in the room, insist on it. Mm-hmm. Don't walk out of that review without getting some real meat on the bone. So,
all right, Gabby?
Well, I have to start by saying that the ION team right now building out the Innovation District and the ION is 80% female. So I of course just picked the best people. We also happen to be 75% minority. And I cite that because, thank you. I cite that because modeling is really important. Mm-hmm. And To your comment, it's modeling all aspects of what it means to have a company that is 80% female and having really transparent 360 conversations. I can't tell you how many organizations I've been in where they're like, yeah, 360, not so sure about that, not ready for that feedback. We, as women, research has said, are particularly good at 360. And that means everybody reviewing everybody else, including senior management. And it is about having hard conversations, not just in the review process, but through all of the different pieces of what it means to own a company. And unfortunately, Gretchen's story about the board of directors reminds me of a conversation I had only a few months ago where when looking at a board that I sit on, when looking at new board members, I raised my usual call, which is of the 3 new we're bringing on, really we should make sure we have at least 1, if not 2 women in that pool. And one of the board members turned to me and said, I think that's a great aspiration. But, and I was like, okay, bring it on. But we're just not gonna find women who understand tech, and we're not gonna find women who understand entrepreneurship, and we're just gonna have to realize that we're gonna have to look for quality over gender. And I've learned in my old age to breathe and count to 10 in those moments. But it was a reminder of what we have to keep doing and what we have to keep modeling. And so rather than just sort of beat them up in that moment, it was making sure that I was out there finding out who those women should be, that I was bringing forward candidates who really knew their stuff, because I know that they are out there, but I need to model and support and build and grow, and we need to do that every day in our small teams, in our broader companies, and then across Houston. Houston also has some bright lights. We are at 99% pay parity for tech executives in Houston, and we are the only top 10 city in the United States to be in that category. That's some pretty good DNA to build on.
Yeah, that's great. Great progress. Very good. All right, Carol, so we all heard the news that Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon announced that the investment bank will no longer take a company public unless said company has at least 1 diverse board member. The focus will be on women's participation on boards for these IPOs. What are your thoughts about this policy?
Yeah, so the whole board conversation's interesting, and I love what Gretchen spoke about earlier. So there are lots of statistics, and I thought about trying to figure out, should we quote some different statistics, but there's lots of measures out there, whether it's return on invested capital or revenue or profitability. When you have a more diverse board, your profitability goes up, your return on investment goes up. When you have women on the board, that happens as well. So there are facts that show it's the right thing to do. I like to look at HP. I'm really proud to say we have the most diverse board of Fortune 100 tech companies. We have 54% minorities on our board and 38% women on our board. So I feel like we've set that great example, right? And so it feels like to me, if our company sets that example on the board, then of course that flows through to the executives in the company as well, and how we can drive ourselves forward. I'm also very fortunate, as Bob mentioned, I do sit on the Greater Houston Partnership Board, so I'm really fortunate to be there with 23% women, and we are growing all the time on the women that join the board as well. So really good opportunities there. So I believe having that diversity is better. Whether you need the quota, maybe we still do because everybody's not acting in their own best interests. I love the comment of you hire the best person. My hope is that you hire the best person. It's a diverse candidate that adds that level that you need in that organization, and you don't have to rely on those laws and rules to make it happen.
That's good. All right, now, Leslie, how do you see this being applied in your field as far as it relates to subcontractors and suppliers and how you're choosing who to do business with?
Sure. So I'm employed by a private firm, and I will say that we have a 100% white male board. So that doesn't go well for us publicly when asked. And so it's an interesting quandary we find ourselves in. Oftentimes our clients are pushing our board to make better decisions, and that's a wonderful thing. When we flip it, we get the privilege of working with diverse businesses all the time. And I always look to see, are we only doing it when it's a requirement? Are we doing it when we don't have to? Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud of our statistics and saying, we far exceed our required. We're doing business with minority-owned businesses in a very hefty way, well beyond the requirements of our contracts, and that's good. And then you want to go further and look to see in those sponsorships, are we really helping pull companies up and really give them the mentorship that they need to stand on their own. And I love the stories that I can share about these women-owned businesses that we met early in their development, and we've been able to steer and guide and help coach them into standalone businesses that have actually are opted out of minority status now because they've just grown to a certain size and no longer qualify, which is a huge success story. And we just love those stories, and we have lots of those. And I think it's a good industry because I think we're very reverent around the need to do that. So
that's great. It's good. And Gabby, how are you seeing this in the female entrepreneurship space?
Well, I think we have a long way to go. Currently, less than 2% of the venture capital in the United States is invested in female-founded companies, and less than 0.1% of venture capital is invested in female-founded companies of color. And those are fairly pathetic numbers. They're anemic at best. And the way to fix them is in a couple of different ways. Some of it is making sure we have strong female executives who are starting seed capital funds and venture capital funds themselves and targeting the female founder market. We have several of those in Houston, and as a city, we're doing very well there. But we also have to close the gap for our female founded and our minority founded startups in preparing them for the funding process. And that means making sure that they can get into those big accelerators, which tend to be extremely white and extremely male. We have a unique opportunity there as the city of Houston. We are the most diverse city in the United States. We have tremendous assets in terms of the engineering population we have here, the STEM population we have here. And we're also a little bit slow in coming to building our innovation economy. That gives us the opportunity to look at other success stories like Silicon Valley or New York or Chicago or even Atlanta, and not only look at what we would like to do, but what we don't want to do. And gender parity for tech companies, small founded tech companies, as well as diversity within an innovation economy is one of probably the most important. And we're really focused on that here in the city of Houston, and it is front and center for us at the ION.
That's great. Okay, well, this has flown by very quickly, and so I'm going to have to move on to the closing question, which is, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to young female professionals starting out their careers in today's environment? You want to take it?
Sure, I'll start. I think that Gretchen, she touched on this, but I would say that we want our females to get involved in the business side of our businesses. Any opportunity to get involved in running a P&L, very critical. We're seeing a lot of females going into management of people, which is great and essential, another skill set we need to see, but we need to see them go into business management and understand what is the driver of growth for your company, and then participate in that. And so that really rounds out the development of leaders and certainly the next layer of executives and C-level management. And so that's something that I really want people to think about, is rounding out their career progress and making sure you don't lose that focus on P&L responsibility, because it's so essential.
Carol?
It's really hard to pick just one piece of advice. I do think it's great as people start out in their careers, be it a man or a woman, starting in your career, try lots of different jobs, get a lot of different experiences so you know what you love and where your passion is, so that you can move it along in your career. But as you do, as you grow as a woman in your career, please take other women with you. Help promote those other women, show them the way, give them guidance.
The great benefit of going last is that I'm going to pick two. The first is that voice in your head that Gretchen was talking about. And instead of walking into your review meeting or the meeting where you want to pitch for that new job, instead of saying, I hope I'm good enough, I hope they appreciate my work, go in and say, I am badass and they can't afford me. Practice it at home. And then my second piece to that would be, I've had the great fortune of participating in a number of incredible empowerment panels and luncheons for women this week, leading up to this Sunday. But we need to do this 365 days a year. What you've heard and learned, keep it up. Keep the conversation going. And as women, turn to the woman next to you, turn to the executives you work with, join an organization of women executives, and be open and support one another, encourage one another. And when that person's voice in their head is failing, say to them, you're badass, and say to them, they can't afford you.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. We could probably do this for a lot longer, and I have to reiterate one of the best pieces of advice that I heard today from Gretchen Watkins, which was, don't be afraid of mistakes. And I think that is very crucial to all of us at all stages in life. So thank you for the great conversation. Please join me in another round of applause for our panelists, as well as our keynote speaker, Gretchen. And I'd like to have Bob Harvey up on stage to close the event for us. There we go.
Thank you, Darcy. Well, what an exciting and to me, optimistic discussion, because this event every year, on the one hand, it reminds me of the history and how far we've come. And Gretchen, I was at Amoco in '78, when literally the first couple of women engineers were joining the company, and there was not a single woman in sight, right, in that whole hierarchy. And now you're president of Shell Oil. It's just so we've come a long way, but then you describe the issues that we're still facing. But I hear a tone of optimism in all of your voices, and that's Houston, right? We can do it in Houston. Yep. We're opportunity driven, we're diverse, we have this can-do attitude. So anyway, thank you for all of you for your participation in this session today. Darcy mentioned earlier, and we've all mentioned it a few times, Women's Business Alliance and the Executive Women's Partnership. I hope this has provoked an interest if you haven't heard about those organizations. If you have an interest, catch our staff out in the foyer. We'd love to have you included. Now it's that favorite moment of every partnership event, when I tell you about upcoming events. We have our Young Professionals group. It's called Houston Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs. We call it HYPE. Many of you are familiar with that as well. It's a great organization for the younger folks out there. I don't know what the age limit it is, but people tell me, Bob, it's about half your age. So you can take it from there. So the Power Hour for HYPE is March 26th. It's at our office. So it's a great chance. We have an event there to meet with our board members. It's a good kind of mentoring session akin to what we've been talking about today. The Women's Business Alliance will host its members-only networking coffee at the partnership on April 9th. It's right around the corner. Women's Business Alliance, members-only networking coffee, April 9th. And then the best announcement of all is when we can talk about the soiree. On August 22nd, we've now set the date for soiree. The theme this year is Celebrate Houston. It's at the Hotel Zaza, as it always is. It's a great party. It's our fundraiser, yes, but it's really just a great event, so I hope you'll join us. Now, the best part of this whole event, for me, is as you leave, grab your parting gift. Girl Scout cookies from the Girl Scouts of San Jacinto Council. So do that as you're leaving. Thank you all for coming. See you next time.